back to Film Garden, folks, and we are coming to you from a new garden for this video, for this special end of year 2017 top 10 movies that Film Garden have put together from Argentina, as you can tell. So we have been here for a week. I'm still kind of a bit muddled up with my sense of time, so I'm a little bit. It's like what 3 p.m. and it's New Year's Eve here in Buenos Aires. But I'm here with my Argentinian family. We're setting up for our New Year's Eve party that we're going to have. I know back home in Australia we've already had New Year's Eve, so to everyone back home, Happy New Year. But we thought it would be fitting to conduct our top 10 movies of 2017 on New Year's Eve. So let's get started. It was tough trying to put together 10 films from this year. It was a pretty barren desert out there for 2017 films. I mean, between all of the typical comic book superhero releases that were, the usual trend throughout the year, there didn't seem to be much else. Now, just to get the record straight, it's not necessarily films that came out in 2017. It's just what I saw in 2017. So the bulk is obviously made up of new releases, but there are some classics that kind of popped up in there again that I hadn't seen before or hadn't seen so long ago. They created a little mark on 2017. So, what were those films? Let's get straight into it. Get Out was a bit hyped by the time I got around to seeing it with Mahez. My wife and I sat down and we kind of expected something that was meant to be a bit quirky, a bit like a mesh of comedy and horror or thriller, with these racial undertones that everyone agrees is always topical, unfortunately.
Rose.
So Get Out. I kind of was going in a bit skeptical, but upon watching it, I really enjoyed how it reminded me of, some of Roman Polanski's previous horrors, like not even including Rosemary's Baby, because that's connected to another film in our top 10, which you probably already kind of can figure. But I'm thinking more of those, like The Apartment. Was it The Apartment or The Tenant? It was one of those two names for this film of Roman Polanski moving into an apartment and absolutely losing his fucking mind.
Roman Polanski is The Tenant.
So it reminded me of that film, which I really loved, and for that it was original. It wasn't a remake, a reboot, a sequel. It was something that came out of someone's mind without any kind of intertextuality at all. From memory, Get Out, great performances. I liked the humour that would spike into the narrative every now and then, and it kept me guessing. It kept us guessing.
Ricky Baker.
He is a bad egg, a youth court regular.
So there are actually two films from Taika Waititi in our list for this year. I think Hunt for the Wilder People might have came out in 2016, and I only got to see it in 2017. It was very early on in the year. But again, it's not as good as Boy. It's not as good as Eagle versus Shark. But it's still so Kiwi. It's still so New Zealand. It's beautiful. The landscapes are beautiful. The characters are quirky and hilarious and funny. And the protagonist, the boy, the main boy, I can't remember his name.
Is there anything you want me to do?
Yeah. Leave me alone.
Cool.
He was fantastic, and his energy that he had with good old Sam Neill was great. And it's great to see Sam Neill back in anything. Sam Neill's one of those faces, those faces that are burned into our memories from classics like Jurassic Park, but also for myself when he was in Event Horizon. I love Sam Neill. I think he's got such a specific way of performing and speaking and emoting.
You play up, I dump you.
Okay, Uncle.
I'd still prefer if you don't call me uncle.
His dialogue is always spoken in that Sam Neill way, same as you would say for maybe Anthony Hopkins and, you know, Denzel Washington, Gary Oldman. They all have that. Al Pacino. They bring themselves. 90% of their roles are still them. You know, the person who is the actor bringing that to the performance. So, I think Sam Neill's in that boat, and it was great to see him back in action.
Sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
What's the fastest way out of here?
Jetpack!
Do you actually have a jetpack?
No? What?
It was clever. It was this little adventure through these beautiful landscapes, and the action scene at the end was classic. So that's why Hunt for the Wilder People makes it on our list.
The enemy tanks have stopped.
Here's where we start to get into the... See, if I was honest with myself, I would have stopped the list from this point on right up to number 1, 7 to 1, because I think these movies are the movies that really, for me, really blew my hair back in 2017.
There are 400,000 men on this beach.
So Dunkirk, yes, number 8, Dunkirk. No, Christopher Nolan's an interesting character. He's coming off the wave of the Dark Knight's big blockbuster success, and then given all this kind of this power and control and money to make whatever he wants, and he's made, you know, a sci-fi heist film straight after that. He made a space opera straight after that, and then he now he's going back. You know, he's stepping back and he's going back to his roots of history and World War II. And he's still made a time-skewered narrative. I love that he does that. I mean, it's his cornerstone. Like unrealistic, tricky exposition dialogue, and beautiful cinematography aside, his calling card is playing with time. Even though it was World War II and quite a conventional, traditional setting, this was another example of Christopher Nolan fucking with our minds in terms of time. I haven't seen it again. I'd love to. I'm glad that I saw it in the cinema simply because of the scope and the sound and Hans Zimmer's incredible score. I haven't seen it again enough to be able to appreciate the more structural story elements that were happening, because it was, again, like a Nolan film, first time viewing, a little bit confusing. It was great to see, you know, Pilot Bane up in the air. You know, I don't think they're coming back around again, so I'm going to get for another kill. And I didn't even recognise the guy from One Direction. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to recognise Harry Styles if he walked down the street in Argentina. But all across the board, the performances were solid, really good. But it is a bit foggy in my brain because it was a while ago now. But I remember it being a big enough spectacle on the screen. And once again, an original film. That's why it makes this list.
The thing about doing more, yes, less is more.
You've met my brother Les. Rome.
Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon are my kryptonite. They literally are in a movie where they just sit around and talk and banter, and they've done it 3 times now with the trip to Spain, and I know people kind of say, oh, this is kind of drawing the string a little bit too long. You know, a TV series in the first place was maybe pulling the string a bit long, but that's the whole point of this. The whole point of the series is that it is a long drawn string of just 2 people talking and bantering and imitating Michael Caine, trying to out imitate each other. But I don't give a fuck. I could watch series and seasons of this shit and still not get sick and tired of it.
Be talking in a rather exaggerated way.
I'm just remembering time. Do you remember, Dave? You had a really long
Drop some
coat.
speed.
If you were sick and tired of it, you would have walked out on the first film in the first 10 minutes. But, you know, like, if you hung around, if you were there but beyond that, I think you're in for the long haul. And again, it was the same deal for this film. It wasn't as good as the trip to Italy. I think the trip to Italy really developed those characters in an interesting way by subverting the 2 arcs of Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, making them kind of, you know, Coogan playing a character who was quite contented, and Bryden playing the character who was having his issues with his family. In the third one, it kind of, I don't know what it did. It just kind of set them on the same, or went back to the normal way of things, with Coogan having his family issues and Bryden seemingly kind of happy with his family at home.
Rob, Steve Coogan. Just got back from filming in New York.
They want me to do publicity.
A series of restaurant reviews. This time, a trip to Spain.
I just love how quickly they set these movies up. It's like a phone call and bang, we're in. And those two guys, like Steve Coogan's, his face and his mannerisms and his so super dry, under his breath, insulting, passive-aggressive attacks on Rob Brydon and anyone else just makes me smile. If I'm ever in a down kind of time, I'm like, all right, just remember Rob Brydon and especially Steve Coogan saying the lines, oh, here we go.
Come, Mr. Bond, you get just as much pleasure from killing as I do.
Come, Mr. Bond. We both know you derive as much pleasure as killing as I do.
That was the
All right,
worst.
okay, all right, this is it. Come, Mr. Bond, you get just as much pleasure from killing as I do.
Something like that.
Come, Mr. Bond, you get just as much pleasure from killing as I do.
Anyway, I just have to think of that moment, and I'm laughing, and life's all good again.
No, you went up at the end, like
Yes.
you watch
Did
Australian
you see what I
soaps.
did on my face?
Come, Mr. Bond, you get just as much pleasure from killing as I do.
So there's a little bit of medicine for you.
Come, Mr. Bond. You derive just as much pleasure from killing as I do.
Rob Brydon is, again, deliciously intolerable. Like, you could not sit in a conversation with this guy without either, like, ripping your hair out in frustration or just, tearing your sides laughing. So the trip to Spain makes it on there just because it's those boys, and they got my heart. I love those guys.
Come, Mr. Bond. You derive just as...
Thank God that, what's the director's name? Michael Winterbottom. Thank God he made that movie, 24 Hours Party People, and then the period piece that did after that. Hey, Batu! There's my cousin. My Argentinian cousin. Walking down the street.
What are you talking?
I'm talking to myself. We're making a video about the top 10 movies of 2017, and you just went and saw Last Jedi.
Yes.
One word. What would you say to say how it was?
Amazing.
Amazing.
Yes.
You loved it.
Yes.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about this later. Okay. You know what I'm gonna say. All right. So where were we? Now we get to the number 6.
Are you happy?
I love you.
Now this one, it's in this list, and it's in kind of midway, because for me, it was more memorable than the previous 5 by a mile. I still remember some pretty strong images from this film. I remember at the time thinking, okay, yeah, all right, so it's doing this. Yeah, so whatever.
God help you.
It divided myself as well as many others, I think, in terms of whether you loved it or hated. My has loved it. I walked out thinking, yeah. But the more time has passed and the more I've kind of thought about it, I thought, yeah, this is pretty. It's different. It's original. It gets you thinking. It gets you questioning.
They've come here to see me.
Come quick.
Even though the imagery and the so literal kind of translation of the Bible tropes into this one house metaphor was a bit like whacking you over the head with it. It's like
You give and you give and you give.
I think it was ruined a little bit for me because I did find out some things about what it was based on before going in, so I was already ready to look at that. And ultimately, I think that's why I didn't like this movie a lot more than I could have, because it was ruined, and it is such an easy film to ruin before going in. That's what an Argentinian phone sounds like.
I just honestly don't know what I have in common with those people anymore. And what am I going to say? Killed the president of Paraguay with a fork. How have you been?
Go see some old friends.
This is one of those ones that snuck in from a different year. So again, I always base my top 10s on what I've seen in this year rather than what came out in this year. So Master Pinnell came over one day and we did a little video which we never got to publish about the best dialogue in film, and one of his films he brought up was Grosse, Pointe, Blank.
Babe, I got you.
And I remember seeing it long ago, the first time it came out, and just not getting it, just not keeping up with it, and not giving it enough time of day to even give it another shot. Until this time, Matt brought it over, we watched it together, and yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's aged well, if anything. Minnie Driver is absolutely gorgeous in it. John Cusack is John Cusack. Joanne Cusack is Joanne Cusack. In fact, her scene where she's just absolutely losing it and burning the office down, or setting up the office to get destroyed, inspired a top 5 list, which is going to come out in 2018. Top 5 best swearers in film. Try looking that up on YouTube anywhere else and see if you can find it. Anyway, Grosse Pointe Blank, fantastic dialogue. Maddie was right. It was some of the best dialogue that I've heard on screen between all the characters, especially between Dan Aykroyd and John Cusack when they were sitting under the table with the guns hidden.
Why don't you just join the union? This union, is there going to be meetings? Of course! No meetings.
The scene where he confronts his old bully and tells him that he's absolutely insignificant, and the bully starts to read out this poem that he'd written about from some anger management group.
There is no us. We don't exist.
That's actually now attached to every time I give a film a number 5 in terms of how I feel about it in a review. In other words, 5 being completely indifferent. That little clip's going to show at the end of each one of those. So it's left its mark on Film Garden lore. So that's why it makes it in our top 5.
So much has happened since I last saw you.
Now we're getting into the the real good stuff, all right? And here's where we're going to go a bit more mainstream. Thor Ragnarok, the second Taika Waititi film in our list. It was the first or second review we did here at Film Garden, second of all time. I remember watching it and being inspired enough to bang out another one of these episodes. And I don't think if I'd done that, if I hadn't been inspired at that point, I probably wouldn't have even done another episode of Film Garden. So again, you've read the review, you've probably watched the review if you're watching this. If not, check it out. I loved the movie. It was the funniest movie of the year. I had issues with it being the funniest movie of the year because I still thought there needed to be a bit more respect to the Thor mythology, which I'm a big fan of. But it's a Taika Waititi film, so Taika Waititi film. Try saying that 10 times fast. Taika Waititi, Taika Waititi, Taika Waititi.
Surprise! This will be such fun.
It was the perfect blend, the near perfect blend of that Guardians of the Galaxy and Star Wars feel, I reckon. I even feel it was a better Star Wars film than The Last Jedi.
Fire. Do I like water?
Oh, kind of both like fire.
But Hulk like raging fire. Do I like smoldering fire?
Ooh, yeah, I'm going to throw you we're not quite ready for the curveball. There is a curveball in here, folks. There is a curveball in here. Let's get into number 3. Now we're talking about movies that I've already reviewed, so I'm not going to go on about them too long here. Although I will talk about how I still feel about them in retrospect. And number 3 is The Last Jedi. The most divisive film in history. I've been kind of like plugged into the internet like Neo in the Matrix after watching that film and just absorbing everyone's kind of views and opinions and seeing the lefts and rights and the dark side and the light side. And Maddie Pinnell and I sat there and we had that discussion, and it was very cathartic. In fact, I'll let you know now that after that debate that we filmed, Master Pal and I did go and see The Last Jedi again that night. I took Marhez with me. She enjoyed it, coming in completely cold and not really giving a fuck anyway. She just thought it was a good film, and I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. I still have issues with it, but I am at peace with it.
Breathe. Now, reach out.
Especially now that JJ is back on, I think it's purely as almost like a real life experiment to see how a filmmaker who has started. JJ Abrams is in the most unique position a filmmaker I think has ever been in that they have to finish a second trilogy from the biggest movie franchise in film history, in the position of having to tie up narratives that he'd set up in the first film that he'd made that were now completely blown out of the water and destroyed in the second film by Rian Johnson, and how he's going to wrap all of that up is just like, I'm waiting with bated breath, and I'm going to be watching and reading and digesting every ounce of news that's going to come out of that film, because regardless now, I think The Last Jedi has ruined my ultimate experience of what Episode 9 could be. It's gone. I think Last Jedi was a decent film, but it didn't go in the direction that I was hoping it would go. And being a kind of film enthusiast and a writer myself, like, I am going to make those judgment calls. I am that fan or that viewer. So, and these are these types of videos. We're talking from a writer's perspective most of the time. So we can't help but start, analysing the craft of storytelling and working out what could have gone one way and what went in ultimately the other way. So we make no apologies here.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
Now, the next one, number 2 on our list, is The Curveball, because it's not actually a film, it's an episode of a particular TV series. Here at Film Garden, we don't talk about the TV series much, but I honestly think I'm thinking in 2018 of bringing in the TV spectrum completely into the Film Garden, planting a few TV series roses in the garden, because in my humble opinion, and as a movie avid lover, TV has, for the last few years, usurped movies in terms of the quality of storytelling that they're telling. So, it is technically film/TV garden, but TV garden doesn't sound as good. So, Film Garden, it's going to stay by name. So, number 2 was something I watched at the beginning of the year, and it stuck through me throughout the entire year, and it kind of can qualify as a movie because it's about the length of a movie and it has the structure of a movie. It is a closed narrative in that it doesn't have any connection to any of the other episodes. And if you know how these types of episodes work for this particular show, then you know what show I'm talking about: Black Mirror and Playtest.
Playtest is kind of a techno-horror romp. It's a video game-themed episode.
The whole of that season was incredible, Black Mirror. What's his name? Creator of Black. Charlie Brooker. There, I did it again. I remember just before I hit enter. Charlie Brooker is hilariously astute at picking apart every aspect of new media that is happening in the world today.
Playtest is a fun popcorn movie that is very much rooted in the horror genre.
He almost needs to retire for a few years and wait for technology to catch up with his storytelling, because I feel like he's wrapped up every aspect of technology almost in 3 seasons of Black Mirror. The 4th one just came out. I haven't watched that yet, so there'll be some reviews of those coming up, hopefully. These standalone episodes are like movies. They because they're not connected to the others, they function for me, especially the longer ones, as a film, and Playtest is one of those.
Okay.
It is the fucking scariest film I've seen since Event Horizon, bar none. I watched it one night with my wife, and I was literally halfway out the door, kind of like ready to just kind of run from the screen at some points, especially at certain scenes where the giant creepy crawly just pops up in your face wearing it. It's getting into spoiler territory, but
Wanted to do one that was deliciously dark and also had elements of fun to it.
Give him a whack. Give him a whack.
there are other episodes in that season which people would argue are better, and more power to them. But this one touched a personal nerve. I think it touched on a lot of the fears I actually have: spiders, mummy issues, the travelling bug, returning home, fear of relationships, just those anxieties that a lot of men have. But me personally, I found like it touched on each. It was like it was made particularly for me and my fears. Fucking spiders. I felt like I had one of those weird moments watching it, like, oh my god, is this like totally made for me, and this is just my virtual world, and like I'm experiencing some kind of like AI brain kidnapping bullshit.
Nearly there.
Mom! It fucked my head up much more than Get Out. Far more than Get Out. It was much more of a head fuck. So, playtest, Black Mirror episode, I can't remember what it was, maybe 3. It actually is, and I think the second time a TV episode has made it on my top 10 movie lists. I do these lists every year. I've been doing it every year to myself for the last 20 years. So this is not something new, folks. Which leaves us at number 1. Number 1 was the reason why we started this YouTube channel, which is still an experiment and still just kind of piss farting around, fun and games. It's got no intention of being, anywhere near like. I'm not a YouTuber. I don't know these YouTuber worlds. I know there's some people out there who have millions and millions of followers and blah 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 blah. I'm really just doing this for myself, as a resource for my students. I teach media at a school, high school. And just for fun, just for my mates, and whatever. They're fun to do, and I think video essays, they're not the future of passing information from one person to another, or knowledge or opinions. They are the present. They are fantastic. People like Nerd Writer. There's a chance again before we get finished with number 1 is to shout out to the people who have inspired me by doing this, and that's Red Letter Media. Those guys are always the best, right from their analysis with Mr. Plinkett, but their Half in the Bag episodes, again, I can't wait to watch. Kevin Smith, maybe Red Letter Media, Kevin Smith, they're probably on either side of the spectrum of the light and dark side. Kevin Smith, always so positive. He's a real fanboy. He just happens to make fucking good films. He's one of the best writers of dialogue. I think he'll be mentioned a lot. And Comic Book Girl, 19, she was a real inspiration, because I just think her content about what she talks about, so on the money. And it just also gave me confidence to kind of think, well, she wants to share her ideas out there, then I'm kind of want to do the same, for better or for worse. She hasn't been making a lot of videos lately. Hopefully she can kind of bounce back. In fact, tonight I think she's got something on, so we might check that out. Who else is out there? And from making this series, I've discovered a few guys. The Angry Review Show. I think he's a bit like Kevin Smith, in that he's a massive fanboy. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. And his reactions to The Last Jedi really they had me nodding my head quite a bit, especially his buddy who sits on the other side. Anyway, now we're talking about people who I don't even know. So this film gave birth to Film Garden. It inspired the whole thing. It got me talking to myself about decisions that were made in the film, which got me thinking about the film as a whole, which got me kind of falling back in love with the whole Blade Runner universe. And yes, that's what we're talking about. Number 1, Blade Runner 2049. Having seen it again, I wasn't as fully immersed as I was the first time. First time I saw it, I was completely immersed. Second time I saw it, I had some questions about some of the plot lines that were happening. I wondered why they went in certain directions, and started get that kind of writer's feeling in the back of my neck. Like, why is he just coming out of nowhere and finding the pod that was racing across the ocean. But it was still such a great way to surpass expectations. And again, we come down to expectations because I didn't think this was going to be a great film at all. I wasn't a huge fan of the director. Everyone's sucking his dick about Arrival and Sicario and Prisoners. I hated Prisoners. I thought it was a dumb shit fucking movie. His first film that I saw on Sundays was brilliant, and Sundays was fantastic. But I found his storytelling quite dry and a bit bitter in the mouth, and his visuals were fantastic, of course, but the performance of his actors as well I found a bit off. But in this, he had done what I don't think many people would have been able to do, and that is justify the Blade Runner world with a sequel 30 years later.
There is an order to things. That's what we do here. We keep order.
For pure world building and immersion and experience and being in a cinema and really, cinema is a visual audio immersion into a completely different world. And whether that world is in a backyard or even if it's LA 2049. And these films really remind you why you should be bothered getting off the couch, getting in the car, driving to your local theatre, paying the fucking, letting the blood out for the movie ticket prices and the popcorn, and going in and sitting down and letting the lights come down and watching the movie on the big screen, with your wife, your best friend, your buddy, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your group of mates, you're by yourself, fucking who cares? Just go and immerse yourself in that experience. It's a medium that is people say are in danger by Netflix and pay TV and streaming services and sound systems at home that could probably outdo some of these cinemas, but nothing beats a projection on a screen in a cinema, and 2049 is my answer to whether cinema will die a slow death.
The world is built on a wall that separates kind. Tell either side there's no wall, you bought a war.
Anyway, thank you folks for watching. Again, from Film Garden, it's New Year's Eve. Happy New Year, everyone from Argentina. Everyone back home. Master Pinnell, thank you very much for breaking those shy shackles that I know you got, and committing your talents and your opinions and your razor sharp, dry wit and perception of things on our show. Thank you for those who have liked and subscribed and who don't mind a bit of very amateurish YouTubing about film. We'll be back next year, obviously. We're going to keep going with this and refine our craft and talk about a whole bunch of crazy top fives, and obviously we're going to be looking down the road to things like Infinity War and Ready Player One, and what I'm really looking forward to in 2018 are a raft of films that sneak under the radar, that aren't superhero films, though I do love those as well, and really fill up next year's list with some great original stuff. This is Film Garden, and signing off.